In the ancient Eastern lands, people always like to talk about those weird stories handed down from their ancestors. In ancient Chinese horror stories, those weird beings always appear in different looks. They are often called Yao, Ma, Guai, and Guai. These four types of horrific beings have affected the nightmares of all Chinese people from ancient times to the present. Yao is just something like an animal, plant, or other object turned into a person. Sounds horrible, but maybe its true form is just a fox or a peony. So in the space of imagination, the face will not be too scary. Ma, or we can say the devil, is born from the heart. It does not come from any creature, but the products in the process of a Taoist's practice austerities. It's the phantom of the heart, maybe obsession, eros, or desire. It could be everything. That is Ma, the devil from the heart. Guai is simply the image of a person after death, or the image of the spirit. When someone died, his body will decay, but his soul may exist. It can be phantoms or attached to everything, usually in skeletons, paper figures, or puppets. Although it is figurative, its image is vague, giving more room for imagination. Guai generally refers to the abiotic, absorbing the energy of the sunlight, the moonlight, the air, the rain year after year, and gradually becoming alive, such as stone monsters, water monsters, mountain monsters. Demons and monsters are very scary, but the scariest things in this world are from human beings. Oh, I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Duan, a ghost from Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty was a very prosperous dynasty in Chinese history, 1,400 years ago. The word Chinatown in Chinese is Tangrenjia, which is related to the ancient dynasty, and in that era, I was a scholar. Now, it's time to tell you my story. In the year I was born, a strange thing happened in the village. In the spring, a pregnant woman who was about to give birth died of an emergency, and the baby was not born. Her family was so sad that they buried her body in the family cemetery. Since her death, strange things always happened to her family. At first, her mother was dragged out of bed by an invisible hand in her sleep. Then one day, when her husband was herding sheep, he was toppled off a cliff by a sheep, and nobody could find the body. People in the village were talking about the dead woman because her relatives all suffered from bad luck. The villagers were nervous. They feared that the dead woman would spread her misfortune to the whole village. So, all the villagers gathered and brought hose and chicken blood to the dead woman's grave. In ancient Chinese legends, chicken blood has the effect of exorcism. The people intended to open the coffin of this woman and use the chicken blood to suppress her evil spirit. When the people opened the coffin, the sunny sky suddenly turned cloudy, began thunder and lightning, and the biting wind made everyone shiver. Suddenly, a child pointed at the coffin and screamed. People looked into the coffin and realized that the long-dead woman had not decayed yet, as if she was asleep. Moreover, her hair and nails were still growing. And the most shocking thing was, under her long nails, there was a sleeping baby. She's still alive. Someone screamed. People were in chaos and no one dared to pick up the baby. At the same time, an old Taoist priest in rags came out of the crowd. He walked straight to the coffin and carried the baby out from the stiffened hands of the woman's body. When he took the baby out, the body suddenly decayed and turned into black water. The baby held in his arms suddenly opened its eyes and let out a giggle laugh. Everyone, including the Taoist priest, saw that the baby's eyes were all black, without any whites. Yes, that baby is me. At that time, this Taoist priest named Duan adopted me, and I followed his surname and was called Little Duan. As I grew up, my eyes became normal and looked the same as other people. But I know, my eyes are not normal. My eyes can see invisible things. Chinese call these eyes yin-yang eyes. When I was young, I have no idea what these eyes would bring me. I couldn't tell which ones around me were people or ghosts. I think there was no difference between people and ghosts until I was 6 years old. One day, I was playing hide and seek with my friends in the village, and I searched for them one by one. Inadvertently, I walked into a long abandoned house. The house was crumbling and cobwebs were spreading the corners. I called out the names of my buddies as I walked forward. Suddenly I saw that there was a huge loom in front of me, and there seemed to be a woman sitting in front of the loom. The interior was dark and I couldn't see clearly. I said, "Excuse me," as I walked forward. As I approached her, I could see her clearly, and suddenly, I was stiffened by the scare. The woman was sitting on her knees in front of the loom, and above her shoulders, there was only a broken neck. She doesn't have a head. I almost screamed in terror. Her dried up head was on the loom, and her long hair was blowing, swaying with her movements. I realized that she was weaving with her hair. I covered my mouth in horror and slowly stepped back. But I accidentally stepped on the broken wood on the ground, making the sound click, click. The woman's head on the loom noticed me. She turned to me slowly, with a strange smile. My heart almost stopped. At that moment, she spoke. "Child, you can see me?" I heard her voice coming through the box. "Child, I am a spiteful ghost trapped here. Since you can see me, please take my head out and bury it, so that I can truly die. Otherwise, I will always be like this. Worse than death." Although I was afraid, looking at her approaching ghost-like figure, I nodded and agreed to her request. Afraid that she would continue to approach me, I grabbed her box and ran outside. When I was running, her eerie laughter echoed in my ears. After I ran out of the house, I realized that it was already dark outside, but I felt like I had only been there for a few minutes. At that moment, the head in the box continued to speak. "Child, please bury me under the third old acacia tree at the entrance of the village. Please, and I won't haunt you anymore after you bury me. Please." I had to do as she asked. The next day, I woke up early in the morning. I heard that the villager Uncle Zhang, whose family were all killed. The scene was extremely miserable. All their heads were cut off, and blood flowed all over the ground. Some villagers said that a drunken man who returned late last night saw a long-haired head floating over the village, and with sorrowful cries, round the head floated a mass of green fire. I realized that the female ghost had lied to me. She didn't want to rest in peace at all. Instead, she wanted to revenge on the person who killed her. I just had to tell the whole story of my adoptive father, the Taoist priest, and he looked into my eyes, sighed, and said, "With these unnormal eyes, you have to face all the weird things. But remember, never trust demons and monsters, and never agree to their requests." Shortly after this incident, the Taoist priest also became ill and passed away. My grandmother took me home and sent me to school, hoping that I would become an elite. Since I started studying, I just want to grow up quickly and go to Chang'an, the capital, during the Tang dynasty, to get my honors. Since then, I was not so concerned about the ghosts and monsters that I often encountered in my life. With the principle of if ghosts don't offend me, I won't offend ghosts, I reached the age of 16. When I was 16 years old, I came to Chang'an, the capital of the Tang Empire, to take the examination. The day after I came to Chang'an, I entered the examination hall to take the imperial examination. The hall consists of many small separate rooms, and each candidate wrote his paper in his own room. Every candidate was not allowed to leave the hall until he finished paper. During these 3 days, food, drink, shit, and pee have to be settled in this small room. The first night when I was writing, I suddenly felt a chill, like a snake crawling across my skin. When I turned around, I saw a pale face close to me, his hand wrapped around my hand, as if to lend my hand to write on the paper. I held my breath, couldn't move, and cold sweat drenched all over my body. But This ghost looks like a scholar, still leaning forward on my shoulder and looking at the test paper. The water on his face even dripped on my arm. Tick, tick. Suddenly, he realized that I could see him. He turned his face to me. It was a pale, swollen face, with a greenish tinge under the pale skin. Even though his eyes were all white, I could still feel him staring at me. His lips were red, like blood, and as he was watching, he opened his mouth and stuck out his long scarlet tongue. Suddenly, I woke up. I thought that I was just having a bad dream, but the water stains on my arms seemed to be telling me that it was not a dream. I was pondering when I suddenly saw the examiner walking to the small room across the street and passing something to the candidates inside. It suddenly occurred to me that they could be cheating. At that moment, I saw the water ghost scholar in my dream lying on the examiner's back, and his long scarlet tongue was licking the examiner's face again and again. The examiner seemed to sense the water ghost, and he turned his head toward it with a stiff face. Then he screamed, and the test papers in his hands were thrown into the air and scattered all over the ground. Later, even the guards of the examination hall were alarmed, and they took the mad examiner out of the examination hall. A few days after the exam, I heard people talking in the streets and alleys. The crazy examiner had caught the emperor's attention. The emperor ordered a thorough investigation of fraud in the examination, and the case of fraud in the examination hall was finally cleared up. I heard that the examiner had been practicing favoritism for many years, during which a number of students were harmed and failed the exam, and even some people could not bear it, suicide by jumping into the river. Perhaps that water ghost in the examination hall is one of them. Meanwhile, I began to think about the Taoist priest's words. Not every ghost or monster was the devil, maybe just due to regret and pity, so they stay in the human world and are not willing to leave. I began to be glad that I had a pair of yin-yang eyes to see this weird world. Due to the things that happened in the examination hall, I did not pass the examination. I decided to stay in Chang'an for 3 more years to prepare the next examination. During these days in Chang'an, I found that people like to listen to stories, especially about monsters and ghosts. So, I started to write a book about what I had seen and heard. Later, people called this book Duan and Strange Tales.